Dynasty Fantasy Football Values and Busts by Round. This is part 3 of us doing this kind of series. We did the early rounds, rounds 1 to 4. We did the mid rounds, rounds 5 to 8. Today we're going to be talking about some, double-digit round guys that are going in the later rounds of Dynasty startups, guys that were higher on, guys that were lower on, players that we have ranked significantly above ADP and significantly below ADP. So if you guys enjoy this video at any point, you know what to do. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. But without further ado, Danny, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. And yeah, we talked about a lot of the higher profile guys, but I mean, your dynasty draft doesn't end after round 8. You have to hit on these rounds 9, 10, 11, etc. picks, and we're going to help you do that today, avoiding some landmines and ultimately getting some nice values. But before we get into it, as always, let's hit the damn intro.
All right, so let's kick things off with round 9. A couple values, couple busts for each of us. I'll start it off with my value, which is Michael Mayer. I have him at 76th overall. He is going off the board at 101. We are using Bulletproof Fantasy Football ADP on bulletproof.com. Adiko FF pulls it from the back end to Sleeper. So this is basically, Sleeper is the main source for a lot of people's dynasty leagues. This should be the most accurate ADP we have. Michael Mayer, to me, is going way undervalued. I viewed him as a better prospect than Dalton Kincaid. If you want to say you take Dalton Kincaid now after the first round draft capital, the Bills landing spot, I understand that. But to me, the discrepancy should not be like 40 picks and 4 rounds of startup ADP. You're getting a huge, huge discount on what was one of the best tight end prospects we've ever seen. Realistically, outside of Kyle Pitts the last 10 years, it's like Noah Fant, TJ Hawkinson, Michael Mayer in that next tier. And I think Mayer has the opportunity to become a trusted target of, Jimmy Garoppolo, potentially a Caleb Williams, Drake May type if Jimmy Garoppolo is not the quarterback there, because the Raiders are going to be horrible after this year if that is the case. But Mayer, full pass catching profile, a guy that can do it on all 3 downs, and a guy that pretty much had a complete skill set. And he is going well outside of the top, 8 tight ends, top 10 tight ends. He is currently my tight end 8 in Dynasty right now.
Yeah, I have him extremely high as well. I believe I got him, and I think he's one of my most rostered players from Dynasty rookie drafts. And if you're in a startup right now, getting him in the 9th round is an absolute steal, like you kind of said. I really don't understand the disconnect in the fantasy community right now for what Dalton Kincaid's valuation is versus what Michael Mayer's is, because I do personally believe that Michael Mayer was the better prospect. You mentioned his receiving profile, early declare, everything you could have possibly asked for from a productive tight end prospect, goes top 35 in the draft. And yet he's 2 rounds after Kincaid because Kincaid got that first round capital to Buffalo. I just don't really see that personally. I'm disconnected from what the market's kind of telling me here. I think Michael Mayer has every bit the possibility to be valued at minimum what Pat Freiermuth was after his rookie season. And even that, I expect this guy to be the number 2 target on Las Vegas. Obviously, there's some question marks for Jimmy Garoppolo, but we're chasing talent here and getting this type of talent in the 9th round who could potentially vault himself into the top 5 of the tight end position in Dynasty. I'm all for it. Absolutely love Michael Mayer at this spot. And my player in this round that I view as a value is also another rookie, also a guy I have in that range of the 109 to 112 area of my Dynasty rookie rankings. And that's Will Levis. I have him 70th overall, going off the board as the 99th overall player according to Adiko's ADP. And I get it. People don't like Will Levis. They didn't like, he's an older player, obviously turnover problems, question marks in terms of what he represented as a prospect. But this is really just a leverage play to me. He's going 99th overall. Out of every single other player in this range, he is realistically the only one that has the opportunity to be a 3rd round Dynasty startup pick at this time next year. Obviously, he needs a lot of things to break right, but I'm always swinging for the fences at this point in my drafts. And if I can get a starting potential quarterback who went 33rd overall at this point in my startup, and he has the opportunity to be where Justin Fields was last year, where Trevor Lawrence was last year, even Zach Wilson. People hated Zach Wilson. He was still a 3rd, 4th round pick in Dynasty startup. So at minimum, you could pick Will Levis. Hope the upside case does represent. And even if you don't believe him long-term to potentially be your starting stud quarterback 1 in your Dynasty franchise, you can just flip him after the year and potentially get a top 45 level valuation if things were to break right as a rookie.
Yeah, he probably doesn't need to show a ton. All we need is a couple big throws, couple good rushing performances, and only if he starts 8 games to close out his rookie season, he's going to be a big time talking point into next offseason, and people are going to like what they saw. Some people are not going to like what they saw and hold on to the prospect profile. But either way, I think at pick 99, you're talking about a guy that is, even if he's middle of the pack, next year as a rookie quarterback. He looks like a rookie quarterback to some degree, and Tennessee, isn't going to bring in another quarterback. He's probably still going to be a round 5, round 6, round 7 startup pick, let alone, in the 9th round where he's going right now.
Well, a prime example, look at what's happened with Desmond Ridder. Like, did he really show anything in his rookie season? And he's going a round after Will Levis is right now. Like, if Will Levis shows something significant in his rookie season, like you kind of said, he's going to hold value. And not to mention, this is not some Mac Jones prospect where you don't have the mobility factor, you don't have the arm talent. Like, no, this guy's got legitimate upside. He's got a rocket arm. He is mobile for his size. Obviously an older prospect, but he has all the traits to be an upper level starter in the NFL if he does hit that ceiling range of outcome.
Yeah, exactly. People were ready to throw the Justin Herbert comparison on him for a reason. Had he gone in the first round, there was a very real possibility Will Levis was right after Peter Skoronski on the Titans board, who they took in the first round to help protect him. So yeah, Will Levis, definitely a guy that I think is a great value right now. Moving to my bust, I'm going to keep it brief with this one because I talked about him in yesterday's video. Dalvin Cook, obviously a guy that is probably going to get cut here in the next couple days. There's a chance he goes to a new situation, maybe rises in value a little bit. If you have Dalvin Cook on your team, I would trade him or wait to see where he goes and then trade him. Because like I talked about in yesterday's video, when the redraft landscape gives up on a fantasy football running back, it hits at an 85% rate that those guys finish worse than where they're going. Dalvin Cook has lost 11 spots of redraft ADP from where he was going this time last year. He is not a guy that you want to roster in Dynasty right now. When you see a running back become washed up, post the lowest yards per carry of his career, his team has given up on him. They're going to cut bait with him. He's probably not likely to have some, magical bounce back season. If history is any indication, like I said, 85% of the time, these guys lost ADP from where they were drafted, finished worse than where they were drafted. And Dalvin Cook is a prime example of that. If he goes, he gets cut by the Vikings, he signs to the Jets or something, he signs to the Broncos or something like that, sell him for any second round value you can get. Hell, you might even be able to get more than that in some league formats.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on the Cook point. I have him a little bit higher than you, but I'm more so in on him if he falls, late round 11, round 12 area. At that point, the opportunity cost is more plausible, but round 9, I completely agree. Some of the guys you're taking him around, like if you're going win now, just take Keenan Allen. If you're going win now, just take Mike Williams. You know what I mean? There's other wide receivers in this range. There's other tight ends, like you mentioned. Michael Mayer's going in the same round as Dalvin Cook. That is an absolute joke, in my opinion. Like you kind of said, he has the opportunity to maybe pay off at an RB2 level scale this year as his ceiling range of outcome. But the bull case is he's Ezekiel Elliott in the year and no team wants to sign him. And we're in early June.
Yeah, and Ezekiel Elliott, I would say, is, like you said, probably the best case scenario for him because Ezekiel Elliott was at least usable in fantasy next year. There's more examples of these multi-time RB1s that fall off that are not usable after they have fallen off, and Dalvin Cook could definitely follow that skill set. So we have Jonathan Mingo, who is your bust, a guy that we're not talking, bad against all the old guys and great against all the young guys. This is a young guy that we're not super high on.
Yeah, this one just doesn't make any sense to me. Like if you followed obviously Jonathan Mingo's cycle, he was not a very good prospect from an analytical standpoint. Obviously he had some upside on his film, like I'm sure you'll get into in a second, but this was a mid-day 2 level player. It's not like a first round wide receiver fell to the third. It's not like Elijah Moore a couple years ago where we were high on him coming in. Like, no, this is a rookie wide receiver that didn't have a good profile, but is getting vaulted up because he's going to play with Bryce Young and has the opportunity to be the long-term one in other people's minds. Like realistically, if the Panthers and Bryce Young show what we expect them to, they're going to add a long-term wide receiver next to him. Like there's no plausible way that Jonathan Mingo is going to be the team's wide receiver 1 in the long term. And taking him over players right now that can give you an advantage in your lineup, Mike Williams, like I kind of mentioned, Keenan Allen. I'd rather go ahead and buy the prospect profile that Rashad Bateman represented over a guy like Jonathan Mingo. Mike Evans, even Gabriel Davis, Elijah Moore. We'll get into a couple of these guys later. I would much rather have over Jonathan Mingo. And when I say I have him as an overvalued player in the round 9 area, I'm not talking, well, I have him 115th overall. He is my 155th overall player right now because, to put it simply, if we're talking about redraft right now, I would rather Adam Thielen over him. I would rather DJ Chark over him. I think he's the 3rd best wide receiver on his own team, on a team that I don't expect to win many games.
Yeah, Mingo, I mean, he's got some upside, right? He showed some things on film. He's big, he's fast, he's physical. He's just not that good of a prospect. I broke him down in depth in the wide receivers to target and avoid video, why he's super overvalued. He was going in a range of rookie drafts where some people were taking him at like the 112, 201, 202 type of area. And to me, he was more of like the late second round type of dart throw that I would want to take. And like you said, 155 overall is kind of where those type of guys stack up in terms of startup ADP. So yeah, I'm not high on Jonathan Mingo either. As much as I love Bryce Young, I don't think Jonathan Mingo is suddenly just going to get carried by a quarterback who I think is really good. Although he could see an uptick in value if he has a couple big games and Bryce Young looks like a stud quarterback. I'm probably just going to sell him at that point in time, and I'm already selling him at this point in time. So let's move on to round 10, where you mentioned actually one of my values in the discussion for Jonathan Mingo, Mike Evans, who is of my Tampa Bay Buccaneers, going off the board at 113th overall right now in the mid 10th round. I think he's the type of guy that you should be drafting in the 8th, 9th round of a startup, especially if you end up going with more of like a contending type of build. You build out a strong foundation. You need wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 type of production for your flex spots. Mike Evans is the perfect type of guy for that. I get it. The situation is not great this year. It's Baker Mayfield versus Kyle Trask. I'm sure literally everybody listening to this has seen the Twitter video of them missing passes, but that situation could be very, very corrected after just this year. Maybe Mike Evans gets traded. I don't think they're probably going to trade him, knowing the Glazer family that owns the team. He's like their pride and joy because he's like the best player in franchise history since they've owned the team. But Mike Evans could have a new quarterback as soon as next year, whether it's a young quarterback like a Caleb Williams, a Drake May, whatever other quarterback in next year's class. Maybe they go and make an aggressive push for a guy like Kyler Murray or somebody else on the open market. I think there's a lot of outs to Mike Evans being at least a wide receiver 2-3 option this year, and then also having the chance to be productive into his late 20s, early 30s after this year.
Fun fact for you. When do you think the last time Mike Evans hasn't been a top 20 overall wide receiver in fantasy?
2017.
2015. That was Jameis's rookie season. He was the wide receiver 22 in PPR, and that was on 148 targets. So if you're telling me that in terms of what that represents, wide receiver 22, but a lot of targets, and we potentially could see a quarterback upgrade as soon as next offseason, this guy has not deteriorated as a player. We already know he's that big time 1,000-yard streak that he's been going on basically since his rookie season. Like, there's no reason to be off of Mike Evans from a dynasty perspective, especially at the cost point that you're attributing to him. Like, Jonathan Mingo going over Mike Evans just because he's a rookie wide receiver that went top 40 despite having a terrible prospect profile is absolutely horrendous in my opinion. And like we kind of mentioned, everybody's so bearish on what Baker Mayfield will represent. Oh, this offense is going to be terrible. Baker Mayfield's going to be awful. Well, what about the upside that Baker Mayfield does show something? He showed to be a relatively solid quarterback last year with the Rams. I wouldn't be shocked, given the soft division, if you guys snuck into 6, 7, 8 wins, given the strength of the Panthers, given the strength of the Falcons, given the strength of, although we perceive them as the favorite, I don't think the Saints are a very good team either. I can see you guys splitting with them.
Yeah, and I mean, Mike Evans played on a bad offense last year. It's not like the offense was great last year either. So, yeah, I mean, of course, they had Tom Brady, but he was literally wide receiver 13 in fantasy points per game on an offense that scored like the 23rd most points in the NFL. It wouldn't shock me if this is like the light version of what Metcalf and Tyler Lockett represented, where we were so out on Geno Smith. They're going to be terrible, but, they're good rebuilding trade targets because they could have a quarterback in 2024. But this is kind of a similar situation. Just draft Mike Evans. He's still a good receiver, and thank me later. He's going to be a good flex option for contending teams if you get him in like round 10, like he's going.
Agree with you there. By the way, you mentioned you have him 97th overall in your rankings. He's my 98th overall player. So right lockstep with you there. My value of the round 10 area is actually a guy I have ranked 84th overall. So a big time discrepancy between where I have him ranked versus where the market has him right now. 31 spots at his 115 ADP according to Adiko. David Njoku is going to be a guy, if this is his valuation, I'm going to have as much exposure as I can possibly get to him, because point blank simple, we saw last season a mini breakout from David Njoku. This guy was a legitimate top 5 tight end prior to getting hurt. And now we can expect Deshaun Watson to potentially reclaim his status as a top quarterback in the NFL. He had 80 targets in the 14 games he played. Like we kind of mentioned, Deshaun Watson coming back, you can expect that pass rate to increase versus what it was last year versus what it was with both Jacoby Brissett and what Deshaun Watson showed in the last 6 games. With David Njoku, you can make the argument, despite Elijah Moore being added there, despite Cedric Tillman being there, that he is the second most talented pass-catching weapon in this entire offense. So him being priced at the tight end position outside of the top 100 when a couple of the guys that we'll mention in a second are going around him is absolutely insane in my opinion right now. David Njoku, I would not be shocked if he was a top 3 to 5 tight end in fantasy and you're getting him outside of the top 100.
Yeah, he kind of screams like last year's Dallas Goedert,
Yep.
where you have a good passing offense that we project with Watson coming in. Cooper's, probably going to get his, and Elijah Moore's a talented player as well. But if all of those guys are producing and playing well, it means the offense is good. And David Njoku, the big, 6'5", massive freak of nature tight end, former first round pick who had a breakout season last year, could catch 10, 11, 12 touchdowns. Like, that is a realistic range of outcomes for David Njoku. I have him a little bit lower than you. I have him at like 100 versus 115. So I'm still higher on him than what the market's at right now. But I'm on the same page, especially in tight end premium leagues. He's like one of the last guys that I want to get if I'm building out a contender or if I'm trying to make a contending push. He's like one of the last guys I feel comfortable with in that like back end tight end one range. But I have him ranked, inside the top 10 tight ends as well.
Yep.
Yeah. So moving on to the next, superlative here, we got the bust of round 10. I have Mac Jones, a guy who I was actually probably higher on than most last offseason after the rookie season that he showed. Last year I was pointing to the fact of all the efficiency metrics that we saw and, what if they build around him? But what if they build around him has not happened. They've done quite literally the opposite of building around Mac Jones. They've stripped him of any and all talent in that offense. The only guy that he could rely on was Jacoby Myers, who they refused to pay and paid Juju Smith-Schuster, who's a worse version of him, similar money. So I really don't understand what the Patriots are doing. If I was running that team, I would have retained Jacoby Myers, probably drafted a first-round wide receiver to go along with him, and maybe even signed another receiver in free agency or traded for another receiver if they were available, traded for DeAndre Hopkins, who obviously was available for some period of time. He needs help, man. You have a young quarterback who's entering his third year, and he's on the verge of becoming a bust. And it's not really his own fault because he showed quite a bit as a rookie. He was a Pro Bowl quarterback as a rookie. And he just, you didn't give him the opportunity to progress from that rookie season, as we saw from Jacksonville, who brought in all the pieces that they've brought in. As we saw from, the Jets tried to. Obviously, Zach Wilson was terrible. And as we saw from the Bears, who obviously are bringing in a bunch of pieces for Justin Fields.
When the Patriots traded down in the first round of this draft to the 17th overall pick, I thought, okay, this is going to be JSN. This is going to be Jordan Addison. This is going to be Zay Flowers. It's going to be Quentin Johnson. And then they go cornerback. And then they fail to address wide receiver realistically until Keyshawn Boutte in the draft. That's the only time that they address the wide receiver position. What's popping out to me is that they're making this season out. I was talking about it with you off camera, but they're making this season to be the Mac Jones scapegoat year, because they know some people in the fan base are still high on Mac Jones, but they want to make sure that he takes a dirt nap this year. So they have every bit of an excuse to go after Kyler Murray, to go after another quarterback next offseason without the fan base really reacting. Because you mentioned it, in terms of building around your quarterback, what team has done a worse job at building around a first-round quarterback than what the Patriots have? Because, going into the year, you probably could argue, well, Justin Fields had a terrible receiving core. Yeah, but look what they did. They traded down from the first overall pick. They picked up DJ Moore, traded for Chase Claypool. They've given him as much opportunity to shine as he has, and he's shown the promise in return. And with Mac Jones, like you kind of said, 2 years ago, Pro Bowl level quarterback, and you have done nothing to invest in him aside from taking Tyquan Thornton and Keyshawn Boutte in the last couple of years, and signing Mike Gesicki in free agency. Cool. Your quarterback's on the verge of being a bust, and you're doing nothing to help him.
Yeah, I don't even know why you spent the 15th overall pick on a guy if you were going to, draft like shit and make stupid signings and stupid trades. Like, I don't know. And when all these guys became available, all these like high-end wide receivers like A.J. Brown, if I was the Patriots, I would have pounced on that. Go after A.J. Brown, bring him in, have him be your number one receiver to go along with Mac Jones. Like, you need to be aggressive when you have a young quarterback. They only have a certain level of confidence before they start to deteriorate in their play and they can't get it back. And Mac Jones might be on the verge of that. Not to mention, at least Justin Fields, when he had no weapons last year, the offense was built around him. They had Matt Patricia calling fucking plays in New England last year.
Yeah, no, 100%. And who was was it Cole Strange they picked in the first round right after the Eagles just traded their first round pick to A.J. Brown? You couldn't tell me, if you're New England with a rookie quarterback, you could have just potentially, traded for A.J. Brown, maybe traded the first round pick you had plus a third to go and secure A.J. Brown. Like, you can't do that. You're not a competent enough front office to support your young quarterback. I just think it's such malpractice, and there has to be a bigger scheme at play here. Hence why I kind of said maybe they look into Kyler Murray in the offseason after the fan base shuts up about Mac Jones. If the team doesn't believe in him, why should we believe in him from a fantasy football perspective, especially when he has an average arm, especially when he doesn't contribute in his mobility game? It just seems like maybe he's going to be the next Jimmy Garoppolo, and paying a 10th round opportunity cost for that right now seems a little bit steep. But I'll go on to my bust of this round, and that is actually going to be another rookie wide receiver, a guy I have ranked one spot higher than the guy I talked about last round. I cannot get on board with Rashid Rice's valuation right now. Like, I understand he's playing with Patrick Mahomes. The Chiefs drafted him in the second round. The guy was one of the worst separators, according to reception perception, that Matt Harmon has ever profiled on the site. We were talking about a guy that against man coverage, I believe he separated at a 1 percentile rate amongst every single draft eligible wide receiver that he charted. That is downright abysmal. And I understand, like, oh, maybe he lands in the spot. He's a contested catch type of player. Maybe Mahomes just throws it up to him and he can get it. I understand, but I'm not baking that into my analysis when I have to spend a 10th round startup pick on a player. Like we kind of mentioned some of the alternative options. I would rather have Mike Evans at cost, Rashad Bateman, Josh Downs. Like, there are so many players, Gabe Davis even, who people are so sour on, but quite literally the situation, what has changed aside from Dalton Kincaid being added? We know that the Bills are going to throw the ball. We know that Gabe Davis is going to affect the third level of the defense. We don't know exactly what Rashid Rice is even going to do on the Chiefs. Is he going to beat out Sky Moore? Is he going to beat out Kadarius Toney? He's definitely not going to beat out Travis Kelce. What is his point on that team?
Yeah, I mean, they still have MVS on the outside too, that at least accomplishes a role for them. Yeah, I was not high on Rashid Rice, was not high on Jonathan Mingo. As I kind of talked about in that wide receivers to target and avoid video, I was taking Josh Downs, I was taking Marvin Mims, I was taking Jalen Hyde, I was taking Cedric Tillman, all of those guys over those two receivers who are overvalued simply due to draft capital and landing spot. And while those factors are important when it comes to wide receivers and their profiles, you need to be a good prospect. Like, you could slap me or Danny on the Kansas City Chiefs and people would draft us in the top 12 rounds of a startup. It seems to not matter. And I understand the upside case, because if he does hit or if he does show something, he'll be a very liquid asset on the market because of the quarterback he plays with. But we're talking about a game of range of outcomes. How likely is Rashid Rice actually going to hit in the NFL when he was, a very, very subpar wide receiver prospect like you talked about?
His reception profile, or reception perception profile, first percentile against man, 7th percentile against zone, 14th percentile against press. I understand you want to make your way
SMU, by the way, at SMU. Sky Moore's were in the 90th percentile pretty much across the board because he played against smaller level competition.
I understand if you're profiling as this bigger, contested catch receiver prospect, but there is a certain baseline of separation that you have to be in the NFL. You need any example of that? Look at what David Bell did in his rookie season, who was actually a solid prospect. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and Cedric Tillman's similar type of receiver. He at least was like 40th percentile across the board, which is a little bit more stomachable given the skill
Better
set
comp
there. So yeah, I'm totally off of Rashid Rice, especially at that cost. When I can get Elijah Moore a round later than Rashid Rice, like, why would I not do that? And speaking of that, we can just transition right into your round 11 value, which was Elijah Moore, who I believe I actually have ranked higher than you, but I'll let you take it away with Elijah Moore.
Yeah, I mean, we've all, if you guys have been following FSC for the last couple of years, you know that we are Elijah Moore stands to the highest degree. And I understand it's been a rocky first couple of years. We saw the big flash of him in his rookie season when he wasn't playing with Zach Wilson. Obviously, this past year, disappointing sophomore season, ends up getting into a scuffle with Robert Saleh. We don't know exactly what's going to go on. Ends up getting traded this offseason to the Cleveland Browns. But when Matt Harmon actually profiled his reception perception profile, this was not a case of a player failing to get open, because he separated a 74th percentile rate against man and a 78th percentile rate against press. What this tells me is, I don't know about what was going on in the building. Maybe he was just pissed off. He was upset with Zach Wilson's play. He wanted him bench, and the team wasn't willing to do that at that point because their alternative options were Mike White and Joe Flacco. I'm not going to speculate on that. But what I do know is, given the profile and given what we saw from as a prospect and the flashes we saw in his rookie season, at an 11th round opportunity cost, I will be buying him every single time. And we kind of mentioned the potential upside of this Browns passing game when I talked about it, David Njoku, Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, with Deshaun Watson potentially recapping his form as a top 10, potentially top 5 level quarterback in the NFL. I want pieces of that offense. And quite simply, Elijah Moore as a player, I would quite easily take over Donovan Peoples-Jones. I would quite easily take over David Bell. I would quite easily take over Cedric Tillman. So if he has this path to potentially be the wide receiver 2 next to Amari Cooper on this team that I expect to throw the ball a lot more than they did last year, I think round 11 is the perfect upside shot to take on Elijah Moore, who's actually flash talent.
Yeah, and we know Amari Cooper's been dealing with injuries his whole career, and he's a little bit older too. So there's upside that he could be a long-term number one, or at least long-term target hog, like wide receiver 1B or something for Deshaun Watson, who is very capable of supporting more than one wide receiver. As we've seen from his time in Houston when he was, Hopkins was a top 5 guy and Will Fuller was still a wide receiver too. I think we could definitely see that type of scenario play itself out. We've beaten Elijah Moore to death right now, so we don't need to keep talking about him. Round 11 value for me, another guy that we've probably beaten to death to some degree is Sam Howell. Similar to Will Levis, because I have him ranked like relatively close to that. Will Levis, I have like 15 spots higher because he was a second round pick versus a fifth round pick. But you have the same type of skill set. Sam Howell posted like the highest velocity of any quarterback at the combine last year on the like arm velocity thing. So he's got a cannon for an arm. He rushed for 1,000 yards in college, along with Trey Lance, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray types. No quarterbacks really do that in college. They don't rush for 1,000 yards very often. And Sam Howell showed even in his one start against Dallas that he was able to run the ball efficiently as well. He has talent around him all over the place. They have a good offensive line, an experienced veteran coaching staff with Eric Bieniemy coming in also to help out the offense. And they have a great run game with Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson. Both of those guys can keep the offense on schedule. Not to mention Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and Curtis Samuel, who, wide receivers 1 through 3 might be one of the best 5 to 10 wide receiver cores in the league. And you also have some upside there at the depth spots. So, I think Sam Howell, the type of upside case for him is that he becomes a 4th or a 5th round startup pick this time next year, potentially even higher if he can showcase his legs. He's going to be a shaky investment because he was a 5th round pick, but it's baked into his cost. You're getting him in here in the 10th round or the 11th round. He's your quarterback 4, your quarterback 3 for your roster. He's not the type of guy that you'd actually have to rely on for production if you're a rebuilder or if you're a contender. For me, I love him for rebuilding teams because I do think, mid-season you could get out of him at some point. You could sell him for an early second round, maybe even a first round pick in some very quarterback heavy rooms, or you could just hold on to him if he materializes himself into a long-term starter.
Yeah, no, I don't mind him at this spot whatsoever. We kind of talked about it off camera as well, but to give you guys some influence here, we expect that with Washington's wide receiver corps, like you said, Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, and Jahan Dotson all on the outside, with Eric Bieniemy coming in having influence, and with Sam Howell himself potentially showing the signs that he can take the leap, I think Washington may be the most underrated offense going into the season. And like we kind of mentioned, Corey, off camera, I wouldn't be shocked if this was a 9-10 type win type of team, given the outlook in the NFC. And if that were to happen with Sam Howell, if he were to lead Washington to 8+ wins, this is going to be their guy, because quite frankly, unless they lose like 10, 11 plus losses this year, they're not going to be in range to have a potential trade-up opportunity for Drake May, a potential trade-up opportunity for Caleb Williams. They're going to be in the mid to potentially late range of the NFL draft. And if Sam Howell led them there, I have no doubt in the world that they would continue with him following the season. So with Sam Howell, very, very low risk, like you said, round 11 at this point. And at least I know that he showed he can be a good football player. He did it against Dallas at the end of the season. He did it when he had the opportunity at the end of the season. So with a full offseason to get acclimated, and with Eric Bieniemy, like you said, coming in, I'm more than fine taking the risk at this point of the draft. But speaking of this point of the draft, a guy that I won't be taking the risk on is Cole Kmet. 179th overall in my rankings, 128th overall according to Adico's ADP. This is more so just the guys going around him that I completely am off of Cole Kmet. Because if we're looking, we'll talk about a guy in the next round that is a screaming value, but Greg Dulcich, Chigakonko, some of those other tight ends after Cole Kmet, I would just rather take the upside shot on, because we kind of know what Cole Kmet is. He's going to be a plodding tight end, maybe score 5 to 8 touchdowns in that Bears offense, but he's never really going to be a fantasy football difference maker. This is a guy who finished, I believe, tight end 7 this past year, which was a solid year. But when you actually equate it, it was 8.5 points per game. Like, he was not realistically providing an edge in your lineup. And if I'm going to be drafting a young tight end, I want him to at least have a TJ Hawkinson level ceiling, Dallas Goedert level ceiling. I just don't see that being the case with Cole Kmet, not to mention increased target competition this offseason, adding DJ Moore to the mix, who, if he stays healthy, we can figure into a 25 to 30% target share. What does that leave for Cole Kmet, who's shown to be a limited player in his first 3 years in the NFL?
Yeah, it's kind of difficult. I have Kmet quite a bit higher than you do, but still not quite this high. I have him in like the 150. I think I have him at 154. So for me, I've been of the mind that I think this wide receiver core and this tight end core all shown the ability to command targets at certain point in time in their career. Cole Kmet was top 8 in tight end target share last year, and as we know, the Bears did not throw the football. They were like one of the most run heavy approaches we've seen in the last 15 years in the NFL. So for Cole Kmet, I think it's encouraging that he's 24 years old and showed the ability to command nearly a 20% target share last year. But like you said, as long as he's on the Bears, DJ Moore, Darnell Mooney, Chase Claypool, some of these guys, they're better target earners than Cole Kmet. So I don't think he's a bad pick, but I'm not necessarily excited about drafting him. And like I said, I would rather also draft, Greg Dulcich and, Chigakonkwo, some of those other upside options. But I'm not quite as bearish on Cole Kmet as you are.
No, and that's fair. Like, he's still got some upside here. It's more so just the guy I'll get into in the next round, which you guys will see in a second, should not be going after Cole Kmet whatsoever.
Yeah, no, that's fair. We can stay at the tight end position for mine. I have Dalton Schultz quite a bit lower than ADP. I've met 153, and he's going at 127. It kind of is just like, I don't love this range of tight ends. Like, and Kmet kind of fits into that as well, where once I get past, like, let me see who I have ranked in like the 120s. Like, I have Sam Laporta ranked at 129. I don't have another tight end until Darren Waller at 150. So to me, there's just a big range of ambiguous backfield running backs that I would rather take. Tank Bigsby, Antonio Gibson, guys like that. And even like some of these other rookie wide receivers, Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman, guys in that area. And some of the quarterbacks, as I talked about, some of those aging quarterbacks, Derek Carr, Matthew Stafford, Jimmy Garoppolo types. For me, there's just a big discrepancy in where I value Dalton Schultz. I think he can be okay this year. I think he could be a top 12 tight end with CJ Stroud at quarterback, but he has a rookie quarterback. He's on a 1-year deal, and he left a situation where realistically, was it going to get much better than what he had in Dallas with Dalton Schultz last year? And he wasn't that great last year. He kind of fell off a little bit. He didn't have a very good season. So for me with Dalton Schultz, I think he's kind of just like an average starting tight end in the NFL. And I don't want to pay up on an average starting tight end. I would rather get a tight end earlier and then use this area of the draft to take shots on young wide receivers, to take shots on ambiguous running back cores, because I just think it's a more profitable strategy. Like, realistically, if we get tight end 7 season out of Dalton Schultz this year, how much higher is he going to go up? Because he's going to be a free agent again. He's only on a 1-year deal. And even if he gets extended by Houston, I don't think he's like a guy that I would be rushing to draft higher than like the tight end 11 or 12 overall.
Well, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. He's just a guy. Like, I saw him up close last year watching every single game he played in. You could not tell me that there was a big difference in level of play when Dalton Schultz was on the field versus when Jake Ferguson and Peyton Hendershot were on the field. There's a reason why Dallas didn't want to pay his market value, because point blank simple, you can find a million Dalton Schultzes across the NFL, across the college landscape, to the point where paying one of those guys 8 to 10 million annually is just a bad investment. Like Dalton Schultz, yeah, he could be a solid contributing, maybe can contend for top 3 in targets on the Texans this year. Sure. But is he really going to win you a week? Is he really going to win you a league? He's not got that Dallas Goedert level ceiling. He's not got David Njoku level ceiling from a talent level. And obviously, I mean, guys after that, Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, he doesn't even hold a candle to. So with Dalton Schultz, it's basically saying, oh, you know what? His ceiling is tight end 7 or 8, like you kind of said. And if he got there, are you really truly satisfied? Because the investment's just going to be a free agent in a year time anyways. Like, I don't think you would. And like you kind of mentioned, we'll go into the next round because there's a guy with that legitimate upside going after Dalton Schultz. So why would I pay up a round earlier on Dalton Schultz when I can get this next guy the following round?
Yeah, and Greg Dulcich is the guy that Danny's referring to. You have him at 111. I'm at 120. So both of us are quite a bit higher. He's going off the board at 137 in the round 12 area. This is a dude that had one of the better rookie seasons that we can see. I'm sure you're going to get into the efficiency numbers. I think one of the more impressive things for me with Greg Dulcich, from what I saw as a rookie, is usually we see rookie tight ends like Chigakonkwo, where it's a high efficiency, good on his targets, and we're projecting a role increase. But Greg Dulcich had the role that we already wanted for him as a rookie, beat out Albert O his rookie season from a targets perspective. And more importantly, he was out there running routes most of the time at the tight end position. And if this offense improves, like I'm sure you're going to get into, then Greg Dulcich could be an awesome, awesome contributor.
Yeah, it's pretty simple for me because he was a 23-year-old tight end. And like you kind of said, he showed the best of both worlds. He showed he can be efficient, but he also commanded targets because he played in 10 total games. A couple of them, he wasn't fully healthy, but in 10 total games, 55 targets from Greg Dulcich as a rookie tight end. And that was in one of the worst offensive situations in the NFL last year. We've already mentioned our love for Jerry Jeudy, potential bounce back for Russell Wilson with Sean Payton coming in. I think there's a realistic opportunity for Greg Dulcich. I know people are going to come at me saying, oh, what about Cortland Sutton? I think there's a real opportunity that Greg Dulcich is the number 2 weapon in this Broncos offense behind Jerry Jeudy, and getting that level of upside for a 23-year-old tight end who showed the target earning ability, 15+% target share last year on a 9+ ADOT last year. Getting that type of upside at this point for such a young player should not be happening, especially when, like we said, he's going after Dalton Schultz. He's going after Cole Kmet. He's going after some of these guys that don't have even remotely the same type of ceiling. 15+% target share, 9+ ADOT, showing that not only is he earning targets, but he's earning them down the field. He's not just this, right around the line of scrimmage, Jason Witten level usage. Like, no, this is an athletic player that they spent day 2 capital on and have a plan in. People were hyping up Albert O going into the offseason. Greg Dulcich absolutely dirt napped him in his rookie season. Trust the hype. Buy in on Greg Dulcich because there's an opportunity for him to potentially be a top 8 overall tight end as soon as his 2nd overall season in the NFL.
Yeah, he's kind of like the Pat Freiermuth of this year. Like, I was really high on Pat Freiermuth, thinking he could take a step forward. And honestly, had he not had like a rookie quarterback and Mitch Trubisky, he probably would have taken an even bigger step forward. But yeah, Dulcich, the peripherals are there. The guy that you want to buy into is this 2nd round athletic tight end that showed the ability to command routes, command targets, command efficient targets as well. Dulcich, if he's not playing on the worst offense in the NFL this year, like the Broncos were last year, he's probably going to be a top 10 tight end in fantasy, in redraft, let alone in Dynasty, where he could climb up to tight end 4, tight end 5 overall in rankings. Yeah, Dulcich is definitely a great value guy that I'm higher on as well. My round 12 value is somebody that, I mean, if I'm lower on Dalvin Cook, I probably should be higher on Alexander Mattison, right? 116th overall is where I have him ranked. 138th overall is where he's going. This probably will climb up if Dalvin Cook is released, which I expect him to be in the next couple of days. Mattison is being talked up as a potential 3-down back for the Vikings. I don't think they're necessarily going to be a long-term thing, but would it shock me if the Vikings went into this season with Mattison as their main back and didn't really add a ton around him? No, I don't think it would be, because they could have drafted a running back higher, and that wouldn't have shocked me whatsoever if we went into the NFL draft and Zach Charbonnet was drafted by the Vikings instead of the Seahawks. They draft a guy to be their lead back, but I guess they view Mattison as that guy. They are comfortable moving off of Dalvin Cook. They only really have Dwayne McBride behind Alexander Mattison, and Madison's the type of guy that can command a 3-down workload. Maybe it's not, 70, 80% opportunity share, but he can be an RB2 in fantasy, and you're getting this guy in round 12 right now, a guy that can be the RB4, RB5 for your competitive team if you're building out a contender. I traded for him for like mid to late day 2 and day 3 picks in a rookie draft. I traded a 2nd and 2/3 for like Mike Williams and Alexander Mattison. Like, he's a throw-in in a lot of trades for people right now, which is pretty ridiculous considering not only does he have, even if Cook was there, like high-end handcuff value, he also has the ability to potentially work himself into a standalone workload, a guy that can be a 60 to 70% opportunity share back.
Well, I actually got him in a recent startup we did, and I got him in the 13th round. So we're mentioning him as a round 12 overall value. Like, this is still where he's going. I got him in the 13th in a sharp draft room. Like, until his value realistically, like you kind of said, is more so in the round 9, round 10 area at the minimum, I'm going to be getting a ton of Alexander Mattison because, like you said, we already thought that he could potentially be a superior player to Cook following last season. And now he's going to have the opportunity to potentially be the RB1 there. And Minnesota is all bought in on him potentially being that lead guy. Hence the level of draft capital they actually spent on the running back position, which is basically nothing. So with Alexander Mattison, for me, if Dalvin Cook is traded tomorrow, if Dalvin Cook is cut tomorrow, this is a guy that is probably going to be going in the 4th or 5th round in redraft leagues at the worst case scenario.
Yeah, and I think you can probably, if your league mates are lagging behind on news a little bit, until Cook actually gets released, people might still view Mattison as like this handcuff type of dude, and you might be able to get him right now for like a mid to late 2nd round pick, and I promise you there'll be leagues he goes in for first rounders if Cook is released, because, I mean, you can make the argument, like in redraft next year, who are you taking, Alexander Mattison or Miles Sanders?
I mean, if Cook's not there, I'm taking Mattison pretty easily.
Exactly, right? Like, we're talking about a guy that could actually punch in like 12 to 15 touchdowns in an offense that is probably going to be very good with Jefferson, with Addison, with all these guys, TJ Hawkinson, that they have around Alexander Mattison. So yeah, I think he is a a great option right now. I'd be willing to draft him in the round 10, round 9 range, and he's going right now in round 12 or round 13, like you said, where you got him. We can move on to some whipping boys of the FSE channel. I'll take it away with mine. We've talked about Juju Smith-Schuster like probably for 3 straight years as being overvalued. He had an okay season last year, I suppose, given expectations. We kind of like rose on him a little bit towards the end of the offseason where we were like, this guy can be like a flex play. But I mean, he was literally playing with the best quarterback in the league on a Super Bowl winning team and was barely a flex play last year. How is it going to change going to the New England Patriots, where, as we talked about, we're lower on Mac Jones, we're lower on this offense in general? Juju might have like 110 targets this year. That wouldn't shock me. But is he going to have more than 700 yards and 4 touchdowns? Probably not. Like I think you're buying into a guy with name value if you're drafting him here in round 12. And I don't think he's worth a round 12 pick, knowing that I can take upside swings on ambiguous backfields, wide receiver cores, whatever.
With Juju Smith-Schuster, if you were to have told me going into last year that the guy commanded over 100 targets from Patrick Mahomes, and then you were to have asked me where he finished in fantasy, I would have been like, well, 100 targets from Patrick Mahomes, like, surely he's got to be a top 20 wide receiver, right? The guy was wide receiver 27 in PPR on 101 Patrick Mahomes targets. If we're expecting the Patriots, who are going to throw the ball at a lower passing rate than the Chiefs did last year, with Mac Jones instead of Patrick Mahomes, and you were to tell me he had 110, 115 targets based off what we saw from Juju last year, are we even locking him in for 750 yards? Like, I don't even think he crossed the 750 yards in that instance.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be shocked if Ramondre Stevenson's like the only usable piece on this offense next year. I'm not high on Juju. I'm not really high on Park. Like, I'm not high on anybody in this offense outside of Ramondre Stevenson. So yeah, Juju Smith-Schuster, I just give me anybody else in this round 12 range. Give me Dolchich, give me Madison, give me Chigakonkwo, give me Jaden Reed, give me Tank Bigsby, Gibson, Herbert, Hyatt, Tajay Spears, literally anybody except for Juju and the guy that you're about to mention.
Hendon Hooker, quarterback, Detroit Lions, goes in the 3rd round, but like, what are we doing here? What is the genuine upside of Hendon Hooker? Like, Jared Goff right now, everybody wants to harp on him, but he's probably a top 15 to 16 level quarterback in the NFL, give or take. So if you're already getting that from Jared Goff, the only type of quarterback that could potentially long-term play above Jared Goff is a guy with a discernible top 5 to 7 overall ceiling. And when it comes to Hendon Hooker, his ceiling may just be a worse version of Jared Goff. So realistically, although they spent the 3rd round capital, if Jared Goff continues the success he showed last year, being a top-level scoring offense, throwing close to 30 touchdowns last year, I believe Jared Goff threw, why in their right mind in a potential contending window would the Lions ever go to Hendon Hooker? And that was if he was a 22-year-old quarterback not coming off a torn ACL. When you combine the fact that he's older than Corey and he's coming off a torn ACL, what is the ceiling of Hendon Hooker? I have him ranked 163rd overall because maybe, he lucks into a Jimmy Garoppolo's 5-spot starts and potentially increases in value. But that is the only scenario I can see for him working on the field. Because as long as he's in Detroit, it should be Jared Goff or a potential actual franchise quarterback taking the quarterback 1 reps for Detroit. I think this guy could potentially be a Teddy Bridgewater in the NFL, where maybe he, at some point in his career, starts a season, but he's never going to be a long-term fixture for a team.
Yeah, I mean, Desmond Ritter's going at a 10-12 right now, and that is the absolute nuts for Hendon Hooker. If he became Desmond Ridder, that would be the best case scenario for him. And Desmond Ridder is like 4 years younger than him, more athletic, and doesn't have a torn ACL. And he's still only going like a round ahead of him in ADP. So yeah, Hendon Hooker, just let anybody else but you draft him. He's not a good prospect. He's in a good situation. So if you have him on your roster and he finds his way into a starting spot at any point in time, then you can probably sell him at that point. But I would probably just sell him now while people don't exactly know what to expect out of Hendon Hooker. So yeah, I'm not on board with that. But what I am on board with is you guys making it to the end of this video. Really appreciate if you did. Leave a like if you did. Subscribe if you did. Also, be sure to check out flockfantasy.com if you guys want access to our dynasty rankings, our rookie rankings, bonus content. Yesterday's video doing really well. Really appreciate the support on that. The end is near for dynasty running back. So breaking down the running back age and touch apex, kind of alluded to it with the Dalvin Cook stuff in today's video. Also the trade value charts, Superflex, 1 quarterback, all that stuff is available on flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE for 30% off. And also, if you sign up annually right now, you can get a free consultation with either one of us if you want it. and we can break down whatever you want to break down. Dynasty teams, redraft strategy, best ball strategy, whatever you want to talk about. If you sign up annually over there, you'll get a free consultation from us. After you do that, just obviously reach out to us saying that you signed up, and we will get that scheduled. So really appreciate all the support you guys have shown. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.